Welcome to this video report on FISA 702, a pivotal section of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, that's FISA. In this report, I'll explain what FISA 702 is, how it operates, the controversy surrounding it, and the ongoing debate about its reauthorization. So what is FISA 702?
Section 702 is the law that enables the United States government to obtain intelligence by targeting non-Americans who are overseas and who are using U.S.-based communication services.
At its core, FISA 702 is a provision within the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act that allows the U.S. government to collect intelligence on foreign nationals located abroad without requiring a warrant. FISA was originally signed into law in 1978. Section 702 is a section of Amendment 7 to FISA, which was signed into law in 2008. Included in Amendment 7 is a sunset clause that states when the amendment will expire if it isn't reauthorized. Amendment 7 has been reauthorized twice, once in 2012 and once again in 2018. It will expire on December 31st of this year if it is not reauthorized again. Importantly, within Amendment 7 to FISA, there are also Sections 703 and 704, which allow for the collection of communications of U.S. citizens reasonably believed to be located abroad. Following Edward Snowden's leaks of classified documents exposing how FISA was being used to mass collect Americans' data without warrants, and later following the 2017 FBI investigation Crossfire Hurricane, which used FISA warrants to collect evidence on Carter Page, who the FBI suspected of being a foreign agent for Russia, there's been a concerted effort towards creating transparency around how FISA is used to collect communications, and also an effort to increase transparency around how Americans' communications are being collected within FISA 702.
All right, so the good news is that at its very core, FISA's privacy and oversight framework is designed to do exactly that, to sustain public confidence through rigorous and regular scrutiny by all three branches of government.
This transparency has mainly surrounded the bureaucratic process around how FISA is used, the checks and balances in the system to prevent misuse, but it also gives a degree of insight into how the system works. Before intelligence agencies can collect communications under 702, the Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence must submit certifications to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, a special court created expressly for the purpose of reviewing whether surveillance agencies are violating FISA law. These certifications describe how each intelligence agency plans on collecting communications, and also what category of intelligence is being collected. The Director of National Intelligence report explains these categories must meet the statutory definition of foreign intelligence information. Certifications have included information concerning international terrorism and other topics, such as the acquisition of information concerning weapons of mass destruction. Certifications must be submitted once a year, and the FISC can approve all the certifications together in one order. The key problem here is that once the FISC has approved the Director of National Intelligence and the Attorney General's certifications, intelligence agencies are free to collect communications en masse into their databases without oversight from the FISC. To collect communications into databases, an analyst identifies a target's selectors. Those are phone numbers or email addresses or IP addresses, and compels private U.S. companies to share all the communications associated with those selectors with intelligence agencies' databases. This capitalizes on how much of the world's internet infrastructure goes through the U.S. or is maintained by U.S. companies.
How do we look at the private sector differently? How do we actually leverage this idea of, hey, the private sector has an incredible amount of power?
There are two programs of collection. Upstream is exclusive to the NSA, which can compel U.S. companies that maintain internet infrastructure, so server farms, internet cables, Elon Musk's Starlink satellites, to share targets' communications that pass through their infrastructure. Downstream is the second program, and it's available not just to the NSA database, but also to the CIA database, the FBI database, and the NCTC, that's National Counterterrorism Center database. And it allows these agencies to collect communications from the private companies that maintain the target's account. To fully understand the scale of surveillance, here's a list of American companies that service accounts. and are compelled to share data with the government through the downstream program. Apple, and therefore all messages sent on the Messages app on iPhones, Mac computers, and Apple Watches. Google, and therefore Gmail and all Google Drive services. Facebook, and therefore WhatsApp, Instagram, and Messenger. Amazon, which owns Amazon Web Services, which provides cloud computing services for many international companies. Microsoft, and therefore Outlook, Skype, and all of Microsoft's cloud computing services. And Zoom.
So let me pause here and offer a couple of hypothetical scenarios in which 702 could prove crucial, to put some specifics on the table. Suppose the FBI gets information that an individual overseas, someone overseas, appears to be recruiting employees of a U.S. semiconductor company, possibly for the purpose of gaining access to sensitive U.S. technology for military purposes. An analyst at the FBI, with that information, could target that overseas individual's email under 702. And this would help us figure out what technology they may be seeking to take, whether it might be used to advance that country's military. That's one example. A second is, suppose a foreign partner tells us that an overseas individual is attempting to sell weapons to a rogue nation that's under U.S. sanctions. We get that information from a foreign intelligence partner. Under 702, we could move quickly to acquire that overseas individual's communications, to gather more intelligence about his or her activities, who that person's dealing with, even if there was not probable cause to believe that that person was acting as an agent of a foreign power. A third hypothetical. Suppose a foreign partner captures a terrorist on the battlefield, not an uncommon scenario. That person who's captured on the battlefield has a phone, and our foreign partner gets a list of email contacts from that terrorist's phone. With that information, with that list of email addresses, intelligence analysts here, our intelligence analysts, could use 702 to gain insights about other people that terrorist is in contact with, understand that network, and that would help us disrupt ongoing or future plots.
Intelligence agencies cannot search their databases of communications with keywords or names, and instead have to search by identifiers. Those are email addresses or phone numbers or IP addresses. In their efforts to create transparency, the Director of National Intelligence Annual Report in 2023 has revealed that U.S. citizens' identifiers were used as queries more than 8,400 times in 2022. These U.S. citizens' communications were collected because they were in communication with some of the more than 240,000 targets whose communications were collected in 2022. Targets are individuals whose email addresses or phone numbers have been used to have their communications collected. Queries are individual searches through the database of collected communications. Here are some case studies and controversies surrounding the reauthorization of FISA 702. In the 2017 FBI investigation into Carter Page, the FBI made 17 errors or omissions in its applications for FISA warrants from the FISC. This has caused Trump allies and supporters to accuse enforcement agencies of having a bias against Trump. It was also found that the FBI misused its database in 278,000 searches over the course of several years, including in its investigation into Black Lives Matter protesters in 2020. The American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU, criticizes Section 702, saying that though Section 702 is justified as a counterterrorism tool, in reality it permits surveillance far beyond what is needed to protect national security. It allows the government to target foreigners abroad if it believes they possess foreign intelligence information, a term so broadly defined that it can include ordinary information about foreign affairs that has nothing to do with national security. This means that targets of surveillance could include human rights defenders, journalists, whistleblowers, or business owners. The government collects the personal information of these individuals, including any communications they may have with people in the U.S., and stores it in databases for years, and in some cases indefinitely. Given our nation's history of abusing its surveillance authorities and the secrecy surrounding the program, we should be concerned that Section 702 is and will be used to disproportionately target disfavored groups, whether minority communities, political activists, or even journalists. Part of the problem with 702 is that while there is now more transparency surrounding how the bureaucratic processes of how 702 searches are approved by the FISC, the way the intelligence agencies determine who qualifies as a target is unclear. In the government's eyes, are Black Lives Matter protesters a threat to national security? What about climate activists in the UK or Germany? It's also worrying given the rising tensions between China and the US, especially in news stories about Chinese police stations outside of China. Does the US government see Chinese immigrants abroad as foreign agents that may be affiliated with these police stations? These questions remain unanswered because of the opacity of the program. Assistant U.S. Attorney General Matthew Olsen and General Nakasone have both described how 702 prevented several threats from China.
Today, we are relentlessly focused on serious threats, such as the Chinese government's efforts to spy on us and to steal our sensitive technologies, Iran's sanctions evasions, North Korea's nuclear program, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Let me stress the threat we face from China in particular. At this moment, when China is ramping up its efforts to spy on Americans, we must not blind ourselves to that threat by allowing 702 to expire.
There is a scope, scale, sophistication that we ascribe to what China is doing today. Are they getting better? Yes. But I think the question always comes back to us as we think about this, how do we address it? And what are our competitive advantages against a nation that has so much scope, so much scale, and increasing sophistication? Well, I think it begins with this idea of our competitive advantages are, first of all, being able to understand what our adversary is doing. You mentioned intelligence gathering. You mentioned this idea of, utilizing different capabilities to spy on us. Certainly we have to address this. I am very concerned, and we are addressing the issues that we made public in May of this past spring about China living off the land, this idea of positioning themselves in different critical infrastructure elements of the United States, our allies, our territories, to perhaps utilize in the future. Why are they doing that? Why are they in our critical infrastructure?
Most subjects of 702 surveillance don't know that they're being surveilled. If they do find out, they have no legal rights to challenge the legality of surveillance. As the expiration date of Amendment 7 looms, a debate rages. Proponents, including figures like General Nakasone and Assistant U.S. Attorney General Matthew Olsen, stress FISA 702's importance in national security. Critics like the ACLU call for reform, pointing to concerns about warrantless surveillance and the misuse of collected data. In conclusion, FISA 702 is a complex framework that intertwines national security, privacy, and accountability. As Amendment 7 faces reauthorization, the discourse around its efficacy and ethical implications remains at the forefront of legal and civil rights discussions. Thank you for watching this comprehensive report on FISA 702. If you want to learn more, you can find the Director of National Intelligence annual report linked in the description below. Please like, share, and subscribe for more informative content.